The Great Betrayal of 2025. Let's analyze it. I'm an animator by profession, so I really love examining what makes some animated content stand head and shoulders above the rest. It's all in those little details that you don't really take notice of. So let's look at this devastating scene. When Rumi's patterns are publicly revealed and Zoe and Mira realize Rumi's secret. That was killer. The betrayal. The devastation. We'll start with Rumi living her best life. She literally just saw golden threads in the honeymoon, and we're at this angle which is basically a POV from where Rumi is, looking out over this massive crowd, with very warm lighting and a complementary palette with the yellowy gold lighting and the purples and pinkish tones in the audience. These colors, gold and pink and purple, convey happiness, positivity, warmth, joy and hope. The camera tilts upwards following the golden threads of the honeymoon, and when we cut back to Rumi, it uses a match cut with the camera motion that tilt upwards so that we have some continuity from the previous shot and keep that uplifting feeling of the camera moving upwards, which in this context is very positive and inspirational. And we have Rumi's arms also uplifted and continuing that movement. But when the camera docks, comes to a stop, suddenly the lights shut off. And it's a very stark contrast now with a still camera and a cold blue darkness, as opposed to the warmth and light and movement that came just before. That contrast makes the sudden change a lot more jarring. Do you notice how Rumi doesn't react yet? Her brain hasn't registered what's happened. She's still functioning off those good vibes. The brain and body take time to process and react to things. This also gives us time for anticipation, a really important principle in animation. It sets the stage for the next thing that's going to happen or the next action, and increasing its impact when it does happen. So she's still standing there. You might notice that she looks almost frozen, but there are little movements still in there. This is called a moving hold, which stops the character from feeling lifeless. You can also see that while they have her centrally framed and both arms up, it's not symmetrical, which is also a pretty important rule in animation. With organic forms like characters, poses will almost never be symmetrical. These little details are what make the characters seem really alive and not like puppets or robots, because humans are not symmetrical, and neither are their actions, even when both sides of the body are doing the same thing, like both arms being raised here. So we cut to this really far wide shot looking out over the heads of the crowd towards the stage, where Rumi is so far away and tiny in the center. Framing her like this, in the dark, in front of all these people alone, and they're all looking back at her expectantly. This serves to communicate just how vulnerable she is there without Mira and Zoe. She's small and dwarfed by the crowd and these huge screens alone on an empty stage. That's kind of a foreshadowing, that she'll lose them and be alone. After cutting back to the audience so we can see their reactions, we're back to Rumi and she starts to realize something is wrong. We cut to this extreme close-up so we can clearly see her facial expressions as the realization hits. The joyful expression changes to confusion, her eyebrows lower and her eyes start darting as she tries to figure out what's going on as she hears the intro for Takedown. Next is the part where Mira and Zoe are backstage having been tricked by the demons, so they left Rumi alone. I'm not going to go in depth on this one in the name of time because there are other shots I want to focus on. Oh, by the way, if you like watching these kinds of breakdowns and deep dives, I have another video out where I do a more holistic analysis on KPop Demon Hunters as well, looking at the shape language, color choices, the overall animation and style choices, etc. But I digress. We cut back to Rumi on stage, centrally framed in a medium shot so we can see her expression. This also leaves space on either side of her, and this staging is a form of anticipation for the next actions, because that space will be filled by the demons when they appear there. It's really dark around and behind her, and she's defined with this edge light on her so she doesn't fade too much into the darkness of the background. This blue light is really cold and lonely. As the camera dollies in slightly, the lights suddenly and surprisingly come back on, but it's this eerie, menacing red light. And of course, suddenly behind her are the two demons masquerading as Mira and Zoe, who'd been hidden in the dark. They actually weren't there in the previous shot of Rumi, that was just empty space. But they suddenly appeared behind her in the dark in this next one, to be revealed when the lights came back on. Check out this muscle memory when the music starts. Rumi knows something is wrong and she's very confused, but her idol training kicks in, and she snaps right into performance mode and executes the dance moves perfectly. This shot has a strong visual hierarchy with the two demons blurred in the background with the shallow focus, and they're lit red. Rumi's here in the foreground with a bluish light shining on her, setting her apart from the demons. Obviously there's bounce from the red light, but the blue is more dominant on her, and she's front and center so we can see and focus on her reactions. This is where symmetry is used purposefully and effectively. And you can see by her symmetrical blank expression that she's on autopilot right now. She's just doing what she's learned for the track and has no other emotion on her face at this moment apart from a slight confusion. Her hands and fingers are beautifully posed with a really strong appeal. The animation of the dancing in this part is so satisfying to watch. There's a lot of contrast which makes it really impactful, and really strong extremes, which are the peak poses before a direction change, the anticipations and weight shifts, and the poses that are the furthest points of a character's movement in the sequence. So here, fake Mira and Zoe have these really nice long straight legs. This is an extreme. They're at the furthest limit of this pose. And what's also really nice about this is the contrast of the straights and then the angles on the opposing sides. This leaves a really nice clean frame for Rumi in the middle. They're still, and she has a lot of movement going on there. They're straight, and her actions have a lot of curves, and curve reversals, adding to the appeal. There's a whole bunch of different contrasts happening here, both in the posing and staging as well as the actions. I really like the juxtaposition of Rumi's movement and the held poses of Mira and Zoe. There's some nice reversals in the lines of action going on here, and this whole sequence has perfect clarity, and it's very easy to read what's going on. This is all very appealing animation. I could watch this over and over again, and actually, I have. Now there's a lot going on from here on, obviously. The camera keeps moving, revolving around what's happening between Rumi and the two demons, building up the tension of the scene, which is also enhanced by how the demons are circling Rumi, like they're predators and she's the prey. It's interesting seeing how the animators portray the fact that these are demons and not actually Zoe and Mira, with the change in their body language. Obviously, there are the lighting techniques, not just the red lighting, although that is a signifier, but there's also this uplighting, which is when the light shines from below, creating these deep shadows, especially around the eye sockets that serve to distort the face. This is a visual device commonly used to depict evil or bad characters. It gives them a really menacing appearance. And the common trope of the head tilted with the chin down while the character looks up, it's a globally understood form of body language. Downward pointing triangles are subconsciously interpreted as signs of aggression or negativity, as psychological studies have shown. This body language can also be interpreted as a sign of perceived superiority or a power play, because it suggests a sense of looking down on someone. Also, the way they hold Rumi's gaze without blinking, perceived everywhere as creepy and weird, and of course those malicious and predatory smiles, these create a feeling of fear and uncertainty because they're so opposite our expectations of accepted social behavior, where you would expect someone looking at you to glance away once in a while, but they're not. And the smiles are not smiles of real humor, which we can pick up on and of course creates a feeling of disquiet. The demons are terrorizing Rumi, and it's happening really fast. And we've got things like these smear frames here to enhance that feeling of speed. The smudge is there to show the trail of the action, that arc, as well as the doubling of Rumi's hand here. It makes the roughness in the way they're handling her feel more impactful and fast. Now this is a tiny detail that I think really deserves to be mentioned. Look at Rumi's eyes here as she looks up when Mira is right over her shoulder there. Her pupils go from quite dilated. Our pupils dilate when we're anxious or scared because our fight or flight instinct is activated, and the pupils dilate to let more light in to help have better vision in case you need to fight or run. But as she lifts her head and right on the beat of the word down in the song, which is so impactful, we see her pupils contract. There's actually a science of pupil size called pupillometry, and it shows a lot about our psychology and reactions. It's really fascinating and an incredible level of detail that is included in really fantastic animation. So Rumi's pupils are dilated from fear and anxiety, but as she lifts her head and Mira is right there by her ear singing, "I'ma gear up and take you down," this triggers Rumi's spiral, and we see her mental state snap in that moment her pupils constrict. She's devastated, and constricted pupils are commonly associated with extreme negative emotions such as sadness or an unstable mental state. The demons that look like her best friends tell her that they see what she is and that she's a mistake and has been since the day she was born. That's rough. This is when Rumi spirals. She can't hold it together anymore. We see it in the way she looks at fake Mira and Zoe in this over-the-shoulder shot. She's framed between the two of them. She sees them as this united front. She's alone, separated from them, and we see this betrayal and shock in her face. They move away deliberately, leaving her reeling. The way she looks at them with wide eyes and a furrowed brow, and she's so confused and shocked at what's happening. There are these texture expression lines on her face that help convey the intensity of the emotion, and that wrinkling under her eyes, that's also a commonly used indicator of mental stress. Her eyes are also now darting around a lot as she tries to process what's happening, and she struggles with her confusion and feeling utterly bereft as she thinks her friends have turned on her. The spinning camera lets us see how disoriented and panicked she feels, like everything is falling apart around her. The close-up shows very clearly the impact this is having on her, as we can see the emotions and battle with herself up close. But it also enhances the feeling of suffocation she must be feeling at this situation. And the fact that this thing she's been taught to hate is part of her and growing stronger, and there's nothing she can do about it. She must feel so trapped and claustrophobic in her body as these patterns grow over her skin. This is when the patterns are starting to take over, and she reaches for them, feeling them growing. She hunches over, curls in on herself as she feels anxious, vulnerable, and has lost all confidence in herself. And this is such a hectic part where she screams and we get this close-up of her face, the Dutch tilt on the camera conveying how disoriented and mentally anguished she is. Her hair is messy, which is very out of character for her, and the camera does a crash zoom out over the heads of the crowd. And again we see how alone and vulnerable she is, with the sea of people staring at her, watching her in the worst moment of her life, without her fellow Huntrix members by her side. There's great clarity in this shot. We're seeing what Mira and Zoe see. They finally realize the truth, that she's actually half demon, and they see that demon side of her coming out in the worst way. She's hunched with her spine in the C curve, which is typically a defensive and uncertain stance, very different to how she usually holds herself. Shoulders are up, again defensive, and trying to hide in herself with all these people watching. Her fingers are sharply curled into these claw-like hands. Her eyes are wide and crazed looking, with white showing all the way around, showing her psychological distress. Rumi is centrally framed and lit in a spotlight. She is the focal point, and there's nothing to distract from what Zoe and Mira see. The background is dark and blurred, and Rumi has a very strong silhouette. The shot is immediately readable. I'm going to skip forward a little to where Rumi runs down the stairs and sees Zoe and Mira standing there waiting for her. As she comes down the stairs, she's breathing really hard, pretty much hyperventilating. She gets to the bottom and pauses while she grapples with what just happened. She's still hunched over, her eyes still wild. The camera is on her as she comes down, starting on a wide shot to establish the change of scenery to give us some context, and then moving in till it ends up really close to her, focusing on her and what she's feeling. She grips the banister with both hands to try and collect herself and give herself some grounding. This is also a form of anticipation for what's going to happen next. The camera stays on her as she moves, and as she rounds the corner and then sees Zoe and Mira standing there, the camera also moving and swinging around with her, ending on an over-the-shoulder shot, giving us a feeling of experiencing this from her perspective. As Mira and Zoe are revealed, the camera slows down and we have some stillness to take in this climactic moment and anticipate what's going to happen next. What the composition of the shot tells us is that Rumi had become separated from the other two. They're basically opponents now. The lighting is dark, the background is quite empty, and we have full focus on the interpersonal relationships going on here. That break in the Huntrix unit. It's further shown in this next shot, where we see very clearly again that divide, that they're on two opposing sides. But just going back to the shot right before this one, the way Rumi is animated now, her body language and movements, are completely different to how she was moving before in the rest of the movie. Obviously, she's in a lot of emotional distress and in shock, and we see that in the way she's shaking. Her movements are quick and erratic, and she's in full-blown panic mode. She sees her friends and starts explaining what happened. Her shoulders are tensed and up, and as she explains, her eyes dart around, looking downwards but not focusing on anything. This is a real type of eye movement called saccadic eye movements, or saccades, and this darting is related to internal thought processes. And interestingly, while this is happening, there's also a process called saccadic masking, where your brain suppresses visual processing while your eyes are darting like this. So that's why she's not actually looking at anything specific. She's just panicking and thinking frantically, not taking in the expressions on Mira and Zoe's faces. But as her eyes come up and focus on her two best friends, that panicked eye darting stops, and you can see that relief start to come in as her brows tilt downwards at the outer corners in an expression of reassurance. Her mouth turns up slightly at the corners and her cheeks raise. She believes that her friends will have her back. They're meant to be ride or die, but instead we see them back away from her. If you notice the lighting, it's green on Rumi's side, and green lighting, along with red, has been used throughout the film to signify the demon side. The Huntrix girls are typically lit with warm lighting, gold, pinks, but here's Rumi in that green light, and Mira and Zoe in a cold blue, used to show their sadness. Looking at Rumi's line of action here, she's leaning towards them, supplicating, looking for a connection and their support, but they move away from her as she tries to get closer to them. We can see by Mira and Zoe's body language that they're closing themselves off from Rumi, ready to turn away. They feel like they don't really know who she is anymore and can't trust her. Rumi is begging the others to believe her and trust her. We can see that's not gonna happen. And something that is so sad about this shot here, when we go back to the other two, we see Zoe, of all people, shaking her head almost imperceptibly while Rumi says, "So we can all do our duty." She's not overtly expressing her doubts and skepticism towards Rumi, but it's still conveyed in these tiny movements that most people wouldn't even notice. That's her subconscious coming out in her body language. Before this, we'd had both Mira and Zoe in the shots to see the impact this has had on both of them, but now we focus on each individual and their personal feelings of betrayal. Now we can focus on her expressions very clearly, without any other visual clutter to distract. Zoe is probably the most expressive one in the group. She wears her heart on her sleeve, so it's easy to read her body language and expressions. As she says, "How can we be together?" she shakes her head slightly again, and as she says, "Your lies from your truth," her eyes widen on the word lies, as that is what hurt her so much. Not the fact that Rumi is half demon, it's that she lied to them. This is the thing with body language. It conveys so much about a person's inner feelings, even if they might never actually say them. The next shot is a cut to Mira, and as is her trademark, she hides a lot of what she feels. So she's quite still, with very slight movements on her body and face, especially around the eyes. And as she says, "I knew it. I knew it was too good to be true," with that slight down tilt to her head, and the tiny change to the position of her brows and the way she looks down and her eyes narrow slightly, she's feeling really sad and let down. And she's heartbroken that she thought they were like a family, but it was fake. She's also already turned slightly away as if she's already halfway gone. As Rumi pleads with them not to leave, you can see the anger start to come in with the shape of her mouth, downturned at the corners and showing more teeth, like a snarl. Humans bare their teeth in a threat display when they're angry. We go from this genuinely sad expression, brows turned upwards, mouth sad, to this. But we don't go straight from one to the other. There's a transitional expression, where her eyes widen, her brows lift, her mouth is rounded, and then it morphs into that aggressive expression. That transitional expression is a form of anticipation for the next major expression, as well as giving us contrast so that angry expression has more impact on us. It's also using the principle of squash and stretch, which gives characters a more organic and lifelike appearance in their actions. Notice here also that her shoulders are quite curved downwards in this slope. It cuts back to the other two, so we can see their reaction to Rumi's anger starting, and then back to Rumi where she loses her shit. Angry expression, brows lowered. She also has this sort of snarl, and in contrast to her shoulders previously, which were down in a sort of dejected slope, they start to come up as her aggression rises, and anything happening in the body is a chain reaction. This is an example of forward kinematics, where the shoulders come up, the upper arms follow, and then the elbows bend and the lower arms come up, and her hands come up looking like claws, and then clench into fists. The timing of the hands coming up is offset to have a more organic and lifelike feel, and as she clenches her fists and brings her hands down again, the camera pulls out her mid-shot as she lowers her fists, so we can see her body language more clearly, as well as the impact of her losing her temper, with the red lines now affecting the Hanmoon and weakening it. Zoe and Mira look at her in complete shock and horror, and she's horrified at herself as well. After all they've worked so hard for, turning the Hanmoon golden, now Rumi is the one who threatens it. Her shoulders are slumped and her eyeline moves from looking at the other two to staring at nothing as she realizes what she's done. Mira reluctantly raises her glaive, holding it straight out as a message for Rumi to stay back. It's not an offensive stance that she takes, it's more of a guarding stance. We see this by the way she holds the glaive. She's not holding it in a way that'll let her swing quickly, she hasn't adjusted her feet for attack or leaned forward to prepare for it. Her posture is upright. You can see by her expression that she's very reluctant to raise her weapon against Rumi, but she needs to protect the Hanmoon and everybody else. Zoe is still processing what she's seen from Rumi at this moment. She looks like her world is falling apart, as her gaze shifts from Rumi to the ground as she realizes what needs to happen. As Rumi starts to cry and pleads with Zoe, Zoe closes her eyes to steel herself for what she needs to do. We're in a close-up here to really get the emotional struggle Zoe is going through, and she has to close her eyes almost as if to block out what she needs to do and gather her courage for it. As she closes her eyes, we see her eyebrows lower and overshoot a little before settling, and her eyes close and tighten very slightly as she takes a deep breath. So we really get that feeling of her needing to psych up the courage to do this horrible thing, which is raising her weapon against her best friend. Zoe still has her eyes closed as she starts to raise her knives, as if she almost wants to block it out. She's also holding them defensively. She's not actually ready to attack. It's not that they want to fight Rumi. They just can't trust her anymore, and they feel like she might attack them. They'll fight her if they need to. It's kind of a warning to Rumi. Rumi is obviously devastated to see her best friends raise their weapons against her, and she sees how far gone their relationship is. Her eyes dart between the two of them as she slowly starts to take small steps backing away from them, and she still has a small hope that they might change their minds. But when she realizes they won't, her eyes drop to the floor in defeat as she realizes she is truly alone. She sobs and then turns and runs out of frame, and the last thing we see in that shot is the follow-through on her braid. As she runs off, Zoe and Mira track her with their eyes, the heartbreak apparent on their faces. They both have very tense body language. Their shoulders are up, back straight and stiff. They're ready for a fight if necessary, and also it's just the tension of the situation. But once Rumi is gone, they both relax their bodies. Their shoulders drop significantly with that release in tension, and they stop holding their weapons up. They also turn their gaze down and stare into space as they now have time to process what just happened, and because they're actually in shock. It was really awful to see them against each other. Rumi felt betrayed by Mira and Zoe's lack of understanding and support in the hardest and most vulnerable moment of her life. Zoe and Mira felt betrayed by Rumi's lies. They're all battling with the fact that they've been taught to hate and kill demons their whole lives, and now Rumi is one. Luckily, it all turns out fine and they're besties again by the end, but this scene was really rough. Well, that's it for this video. I hope it wasn't too long, and if you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and actually leave a comment and let me know what your favorite scene in this movie was. Thank you to my patrons as always. You guys are awesome. Thanks for watching. Bye!